downriver Michigan. When someone says the word downriver, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? River, boats, south, birds. How about the first automobile bridge downriver? Behind me is the Grosse Ile Toll Bridge, the first bridge to Grosse Ile for vehicle traffic. Built between 1912 and 1913 by owner of the northern end of Grosse Ile, Edward W. Voigt. Voigt was a well-known businessman in the community, one of the founders of Detroit Edison Company, owner of a large beer brewery, a ferry boat company, founders of Detroit Museum of Arts, Miles Theater Company, and Voigt Parks in Detroit. He foresaw the need for improvements in transportation to and from Grosse Ile. Edward W. Voigt was born in Deubeln, Saxony, Germany on April 5, 1844. His father brought him to America in 1854 when he was 10 years old. Voigt followed his father in business, taking over a beer brewery he had established in the 1860s. Under the Junior Voigt's leadership, sales increased, and he eventually bought the business from his father. His product soon became one of the most popular in the city, and the capacity of his brewery grew from 3,000 barrels annually to more than 43,000 barrels, which was then the largest brewery production in the state of Michigan. Voigt's business ventures expanded beyond brewing, and he became one of the most prominent businessmen in Detroit during this era. He was one of the founders of the Edison Illuminating Company, which was the forerunner to Detroit Edison. He founded the Port Huron, Suffet, and Paper Company and was involved in railroad ventures, among other business activities. Voigt was also a major real estate developer in Detroit who assisted in planting the lots and building streets for a very desirable neighborhood along Woodward Avenue, now known as the Boston Edison Historic District. On Grosse Ile, Voigt owned and ran a large horse farm known as the Island Homestock Farm, which was located on part of the 400 acres of land he owned on the north end of the island. He raised Percheron horses on the farm that his brewery used to transport beer barrels in Detroit. He also owned a ferry boat service that was one of the few businesses that regularly carried people and goods to and from Grosse Ile. Voigt transported his Percheron horses from the farm to the mainland with the ferry boat. This experience became an ambitious plan to build an automobile bridge on the north end of the island. He felt the automobile bridge would make it easier for the transporting of the Percheron horses to the mainland, while also providing Grosse Ile residents with a much-wanted way of easily and quickly accessing the island with vehicles. At the time, the idea of building an automobile bridge was very popular with Grosse Ile residents. However, given there were fewer than 1,000 residents on Grosse Ile, and local governments did not have funding to build an automobile bridge to Grosse Ile, this project could only be made a reality with private funding. Voigt took on the challenge by obtaining the financing and forming the Grosse Ile Bridge Company on May 1st, 1912, to build the Grosse Ile Toll Bridge as a self-sustaining enterprise that would serve the public. Voigt was the first president of the GIBC and owned 99% of the shares. The toll bridge connects two downriver communities, the community of Riverview and the community of Grosse Ile Township. The bridge consists of 900 tons of steel and is over 3,100 feet long, starting over at Riverview at the narrow area and continuing on to the large causeway in Grosse Ile. The bridge at its highest point is over 90 feet high, and it sits about 10 feet above the water. Interestingly enough, there's a smaller bridge, 32 feet wide, which runs along the Grosse Ile shoreline, and it's a small channel. It runs around the small channel there. We need to keep in mind that this was the first bridge connecting the downriver communities with Grosse Ile. And because it's a privately owned bridge, there is a toll charged. 2012 marks the 100th year anniversary of the Grosse Ile Bridge Company. The bridge can be categorized by engineers as a center pier swing bridge. It was built for functionality reasons to keep the Trenton Channel of the Detroit River open for ships to pass through. The bridge has one pier that rotates for 45 degrees, and the pier always remains in the center. Historic bridge expert Nathan Holth arrives for a visit to explore the bridge construction in a deeper level.
Swing bridges were oftentimes not used in later years because they opened only two narrow channels, and a lot of times boats would want a larger channel. But the swing bridge has served its purpose in this location quite well. There have been a couple accidents that has happened over the bridge's history. The main swing span is a through truss type of superstructure. The through truss is a Warren truss configuration, which refers to the V pattern that we see in the truss. A truss is a series of triangles which are hooked together to form a series of triangles that strengthen the bridge and provide for a strong load carrying ability on the bridge. The pieces are connected together with what we call connections, and in this case they're what we would call riveted connections, which means they are connected together with rivets to what is called a gusset plate, and it provides a very rigid connection. It works good to support load. And this particular truss has the riveted connection because it was built in 1913, and in this period they were able to rivet these parts together and create a very solid connection. This is a change from maybe 10, 20 years ago when they were more commonly pin connected, which means they were much more loose and they were easy to assemble though, and that's why they did that in the past. So in some ways you might say this bridge represented the cutting edge of technology in terms of truss design. However, as a swing bridge it would have been more of a traditional design, and swing bridges were becoming less popular because of the bascule type of bridge, which would actually raise up and open like this to create a open channel without that pier in the middle of the channel, so it gave boats more room. So in some ways the swing bridge was an older design that they were falling back on and combining it with the new technology of riveted connection. The bridge also has, in addition to the center pier swing span, 4 through truss approach spans, 2 at each end on either side of the swing span. These also follow a Warren truss configuration. Specifically, it would be called a polygonal Warren truss configuration, which refers to the arch shape on the truss, which is created by arranging these series of straight beams at different angles to create the appearance of an arch shape. The bridge also has a series of approach spans in addition to these. On these plans you can see a series of short spans listed as a trestle approach. The bridge also originally had, separately, a pony truss span. A pony truss referring to a much smaller type of truss that doesn't have overhead bracing that you would drive through. This span has been replaced in recent years, but it was part of the original design. Another aspect of the original design that is included in these plans that never came to be was the sidewalk. The original plans outlined the sidewalk, but it was not specified to be built originally. It was something that they were able to add later if they wanted to. That never happened.
takes from the bridge opening to bridge closing for a small craft is usually about 5 to 6 minutes. The first thing I do is I hit the signal lights. That tells the vessel out there that I know that he knows that I know that he's there. And according to the instructions on the wall there, it has to be done. So he can't proceed without that signal light going on. The very next thing I do is I turn on the bells and flashers. That lets the car traffic know that, hey, the bridge is going to be open. Follow that by turning on the red traffic control lights from green to red. Once I see that the cars are clear, I'll bring the gates down. Once the gates are down, I go to the control panel, I put it on automatic, I retract the jacks, I disengage the locking pins, I take the clutch and I put it into span position. Sometimes we have to jog, almost always we have to jog the motor to get in that position. Once I'm in span position, I sound the marine horn. It's very loud. One long, one short. See, everything's behind the buoys first with piers. The boats are behind the piers. They're not in any way. I open the bridge, and that's a button. Then the bridge opens. It takes about a minute for it to open it up. Then the vessel goes through. Once he's clear of the pier, once he's past the pier, I sound the marine horn one long blast, and then I close the bridge. Now, when the bridge is closing, there's an alignment process. You have to get the bridge to align to the roadway exactly, and that tends to wiggle a little bit, and that takes about a minute. And once it's perfectly aligned, I engage the locking pins. Once the locking pins are engaged, I put the clutch to jack position. Then I extend the jacks, raise the gates, turn off the bells and flashers, turn off the signal lights, and there you go. Have a big freighter, it could be like 20 minutes because you open it up very soon because he can't stop, and it's a lot of weight. You know, there are thousands of tons of in that ship there, and it's not like a car. He can't stop. So we open it well. As soon as he commands us to open it, we open it.
For most of its history, the operation of the toll bridge has been uneventful. However, there have been two major accidents involving lake freighters over the years. The first in 1965 and the second in 1992. On the August 6, 1965 accident, the lake freighter John T. Hutchinson lost control while traveling up the river and hit the fixed span on the island side of the bridge. The ship's bow crumpled one span, and 7 men threw themselves in the water for safety. 3 cars were knocked down the river, but fortunately no one was hurt. The estimate of the damage for the bridge was $100,000.
My name is Bill Heinrich. I lived on Grosio for 83 years, almost 84 years. I was retired at the time that the 1964 accident happened. I retired very young. I built a boatyard in Gibraltar. I had a boat in my boathouse on West River Road. I received a phone call. A freighter had hit the toll bridge. I was always very, very interested in the toll bridge because one of my father's uncles was one of the founders of the toll bridge. He was the first treasurer. And I got in my Chris Craft 22-foot sea skiff and hightailed it up here to the toll bridge to see what was going on. Unfortunately, I was too late. The freighter had been towed away, and the Coast Guard boat and several other cruisers were mulling around. I took my camera with me, thank God, and I took some color slides. there was 3 or 4 cars on the the east span of the bridge, the Grosse Ile side of the span, that had been knocked in the water, and the cars were mostly in the water. So I snapped quite a few pictures. Went home and got on the phone again, inquire about a few things. Got a hold of my friend Lee Edwards, who was president of Wyandotte Toy Company, and he had a brand new Cadillac. And he was waiting on the Grosse Ile side of the bridge. He at that time, he didn't live in Wyandotte, he lived on Park Lane. And he was waiting on the Grosse Ile side of the bridge. And he saw this freighter coming. And he said, "Oh, I know what's going to happen here." He was an experienced boater. And he said he slowly got out of his car and walked back to the span on the east side. And he said, "I got off of it just in time." And it was funny. Brand new Cadillac. He got another brand new Cadillac out of this thing. This was quite an experience. I wish I'd taken more pictures.
And here, the boat accident in 1965. It was a nice day. I almost remember it like it was yesterday. It was a nice day. I was working as a dog warden and health and license inspector with the city, and the police department only had one man on the desk, which was Lieutenant Leroy Melms, and then Bob Guinea, who was a patrolman, and myself. Well, it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon, right around shift change. And Bob and I, Patrolman Guinea, were writing up our reports for the end of the day when the phone rang, and Lieutenant Melms answered the phone, and we were listening to see. We didn't know what was happening. We may have to leave and go on a run. So we heard Lieutenant Melms say, "Hi, Vince, how the heck are you?" Because we always talked to the guy on the bridge. Vince was a very personable guy, and we'd stop and say hello because this is a small town, and our routine of patrolling the town got pretty small, so we'd stop on the bridge and talk with Vince for a while. Yeah, that's how we got to know him. And he'd say, "You're kidding, Vince." "No, can't be. You're Vince. You're kidding me. Is that right? You're kidding me, Vince." And he kept going on like that. So Leroy hangs up the phone. He said, "Guys, get over at the bridge. A boat just hit the bridge." And he says, "There's people in the water over there." So we jumped in the car, Bob Guinea and myself, and we sailed over there, and we got there, and we pulled right up on the bridge, and the bridge had already, it was swung open and it stayed open, so we could only go so far, and then we'd have been in the water, but they had the barricade. And we looked across the way, and on the other side, as I say the other side, there was a huge freighter. And he was just sitting there, and I looked over and I could see cars. Even when we were pulling up, we could see that the bridge the other section of bridge had fallen into the water, and we saw cars on that section just like they were suspended, not sliding into the water yet. And I thought, oh my God, somehow we got to get over there, And then right after that, I saw the Grosse Ile police pull up, and they would have had to gone in the water to go swimming to pick these people up. But later we found out that nobody landed in the water. They had seen the bridge, and Vince was waving his arms frantically, get back, and then boom, they hit the bridge, and everybody went running and got off of that span before it hit the water. The guys jumped out of their cars and everything.
27 years later, on September 6, 1992, the 730-foot freighter boat H. Lee White lost control traveling down the river and hit the bridge, got one of the approach stands and knocked them down in the river. As quoted by the Ile camera, the ship missed the east side opening of Grosse Ile Bridge by about 100 feet. The freighter was headed south to McLeod Steel in Trenton with a load of iron ore pellets. As a result of the accident, the ship was stuck in an angled position for about 12 hours, with the bow wedged against the bridge and the stern aground on the mainland. Several cars on the bridge managed to get safely off when the crash appeared inevitable. No one was hurt. The Trenton Channel remained blocked until 7 tugboats pulled the freighter out of the mud. Although there was about $250,000 in damage to the ship, crew members said the freighter was deemed fit.
My name's Ted Voigt. I was project manager for J.S. Albarisi Construction Company, and when the bridge went out in September 1992, and I believe it was September 6, 1992, and my wife and I was traveling in the neighborhood, and we had heard what had happened on the radio, and I told her, what was going on, and she says, well, I think the owner of the bridge company comes into the restaurant where my wife was working. It was my sister's restaurant. It was called Kathy's Cafe on the island. And I said, well, you know what? And this was on a Sunday. I says, tomorrow morning, I says, if that owner comes in, Mr. Smoke, give him my card. Tell him this is what your husband does and the type of work, the business that they're in, and we can help him out if he needs any help. So next morning that happened. Wasn't long after that same morning, Paul had given me a call. I was at my office, and he had given me a call and asked if I would meet him down at the bridge.
My name is Bruce Burt from Ruby & Associates. I'm Vice President of Engineering. At the time of the replacement of the Girl Seal bridge span, I was a project engineer at Ruby & Associates. I was called on Labor Day of 1992 by Dave Ruby, who was the founding principal of Ruby & Associates. He told me, Bruce, there's a problem down at the bridge. There's been a collision, and I need you to come down just as soon as possible because it's been a very serious accident. So that was Labor Day. The following morning I came down to the bridge to see that, in fact, a freighter had struck the bridge and knocked it completely off its moorings and into the water, virtually destroying that span. And we knew that this was the timing of getting the replacement span in place as quickly as possible was critical because of the inconvenience to residents.
Paul had ended up giving Ruby a contract for the engineering, and then at the same time he had us put some packages together to put the bridge out to bid.
And so we put together a set of plans and specifications, sent it out to a list of bidders, and the low bidder was then awarded the project. That company was Albarisi, located in St. Louis, Missouri, and they had got the project to not only fabricate the new structure but also to put it in place.
And one of my ideas was for removing the bridge was to incorporate 2 barges and basically hook the 2 barges, sink the barges down, and then hook it to the bridge, and then lift the bridge, pump the barges back out, and lift the damaged bridge out of the water. It brought it over to the land, and then we, through a series of picks where we hooked onto it and moved it in, and then we rehook again and moved it in again. We managed to get it up on shore, and we did a guesstimate on the weight because it still had the blacktop, the original decking, the white pine decking in it, and it was really heavy, and then that white pine decking was soaked because it had laid in the water for quite a while there, so it had soaked up a bunch of water. But we guesstimated that that old span weighed in the neighborhood of 600 to 700 ton.
The bridge was fabricated in Albarisi's St. Louis facility. It was completely pre-assembled in their shop to ensure that the fit-up was correct. And once it was assembled, then it was disassembled and placed on trucks and then shipped to Michigan for reassembly on site. The bridge was then constructed on the barge, and the concrete deck was placed on the bridge. We did use a component called a tension control bolt to mimic the look of a rivet. The tension control bolt is a unique type of fastener that has a splined end that a special wrench attaches to. The wrench attaches to both the spline and the nut, and as the bolt is tensioned, the wrench fastens onto this splined area, and when the bolt reaches the proper tension, this spline shears off. So the spline then isn't visible, and you end up with a bolt that has a button head like this that resembles a rivet. If you drive over the Grosse Ile Toll Bridge and you look at that particular span, look closely at the fasteners and you'll see that they don't exactly match or mimic a rivet. They have a nut on one side and then a button head similar to a rivet on the other. January 17th, the work began to install the bridge on the supports. I was on the bridge at the time watching closely, and the entire process of installing the bridge from the time it was unmoored on at the landing site to the installation on in line with the other spans on the piers was only a matter of about 2 hours. And once it was put in place, the traffic was almost immediately opened. I believe it was only about 2 hours of additional work that needed to be done, and then the bridge was open for service. So from the time of the accident, which was Labor Day of 1992, to when it was placed in service was about 4.5 months, which, considering that it was a competitively bid project, there was an insurance company that was involved, that the bridge had to be fabricated from entirely new components and then assembled on a barge and installed in the middle of winter. I think that's a very impressive track record for Al Barisi and all the workers that were associated with that project.
The toll bridge has one of the most beautiful sights on the Detroit River. Here an endangered species of the common tern comes every late spring and nests in colonies. Many birds and other species occupy the undisturbed wildlife. Downriver historical monuments, such as this one, are the hidden jewels of Metro Detroit, still waiting for their exploration from all the people who love boats, water, fishing, and sightseeing.